Hello everyone, and welcome back to the 3T Path channel. Welcome back to our Uddhava-gita course. So now we're entering a new chapter in our course. We're starting chapter 9 of the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where the Avadhuta Brahmana, Dattatreya Guru, is teaching us things he has learned from his experience just from life. His gurus are things in life and nature and around him. So last class we had the wonderful story of Pingala, the prostitute. It's a very profound and moving story, and how she became enlightened. And now, as we're starting a new chapter, he's going to talk a little bit more about detachment. And then if we have time, we're going to start the story of a little girl with bracelets and how he learned from that. So here we go again. If you want to watch the previous classes, make sure you look at the instructions here below in the description of the video, and you become a member of this channel. And as a member, you have access to all the previous Uddhava-gita classes. Okay, so again, we're in Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, chapter 9, starting with verse 1. The saintly Brahmana said, "Everyone considers certain things within the material world to be most dear to him. And because of attachment to such things, one eventually becomes miserable. One who understands this gives up material possessiveness and attachment, and thus achieves unlimited happiness." So one of the big points that we've mentioned before here is that this Brahmana, he holds, he holds on to the concept of total renunciation, just renouncing everything. I mean, he's a wandering sage. He has nothing at all. He's just wandering around with barely any scrap of clothes on him. He just, that's it. He doesn't want anything. He's not attached to anything. He's not settled anywhere, just walking around. And he's going to emphasize this mood of his in these verses. Of course, for us, that's not so applicable. It's a different era. We can't even do this anymore. I mean, practically speaking, we can't even be so, without address and without, it's like then you become a homeless person, and it's so horrible. It's so difficult. It's nearly impossible to live like this. It was a different culture. Of course, the climate was a temperate climate, so you need shelter in winter and stuff. And people would give out food to these wandering sages. It was a different idea. But what can we learn from this? Is this totally not we can apply this to our lives as well, because we can have things without becoming attached. You can possess things. You can possess your clothes and your house and car, and you can have family. He's going to be anti-family. He's going to say, forget everything. But we can have all these things, but with the right mentality, knowing that everything is temporary, everything is ephemeral, knowing that at any moment, anything can be taken away. And of course, death can come and take us away from everything and everyone. So we can know this, we can be prepared, we can live detached, we can live without, having our attachments drive us to unhappiness. So that's what we're going to try to do. But he is talking about just forget it. It's so difficult. Just be detached from everything, and then you will be unlimitedly happy. Verse 2. Once a group of large hawks were unable to find any prey, attacked one another. Weaker hawk attacked another weaker hawk who was holding some meat. At that time, being in danger of his life, the hawk gave up his meat and then experienced actual happiness. So he gives this guru, he had a hawk as a guru. One of his gurus in nature was a little hawk who was carrying a little bit of meat. So he was attached to his meat, he was there, he had some meat. But then these bigger hawks come and attack him to rob him of his meat. So what does he do? He lets go of the meat. Otherwise he was going to be attacked by the larger hawks. So then he lets go of the meat and then he's happy. So that he gives that example. Now I'm happy. Purport. Incited by the modes of nature, birds become violent and kill other birds to eat them or to steal meat captured by them. Hawks, vultures, and eagles are in this category. However, one should give up the envious propensity to commit violence against others and should take to Krishna consciousness, whereby one sees every living entity as equal to oneself. On this platform of actual happiness, one does not envy anyone and thus sees no one as his enemy. Verse 3. In family life, the parents are always in anxiety about their home, children, and reputation. But I have nothing to do with these things. I do not worry at all about any family, and I do not care about honor and dishonor. I enjoy only the life of the soul, and I find love on the spiritual platform. Thus, I wander the earth like a child. So this verse really captures the mood of this wandering sage and of wandering sages throughout life, throughout history of the world. So many of these sages we've seen in history have become famous. Even Jesus was like this, he was also just like, no family, forget everything, just wander about, no belongings. And he would famously, like when people tried to join him when he was still on earth, he would say, like, leave everything behind. If you want to come with me, just drop everything, and just come with me with nothing. So he was like that. He had the same mentality as this Dattatreya Guru. So again, so he's given up on everything. He says, no family, forget it. I'm just like a child wandering through the earth. But, most of us, we have family. I have family. You probably have family too, or will have. So again, we don't have to give up on family. We really just have to give up on the unhealthy attachment, on the illusory concept that they are the source of our happiness, because they're not. The source of your happiness is your own self and God. And you don't need anything from matter. We can never forget, the yoga is telling you, what's the last verse of the Yoga Sutras? And, Patanjali explains that this world, the yogi understands, has shunya artha, zero value. So we know that we don't need anyone or anything, Krishna teaches in Bhagavad-gita. So, that's how you should take on life. You don't need anyone or anything. And actually all of this matter, the whole universe, everything has zero value to you as a soul. Zero. You don't need any of this stuff. Okay, because it's like, do you need anything in your dream? To understand this concept, think about your dream. Some dream you had last night or whatever dream, or just dreams in general. Do you need, now that you're awake, do you need anything from those dreams? It's like, what? It's like a dream. It was just an idea in my head. It's not even a real thing. You can say, no, I need that car in my dream to be here now, but it's not. It was something else. It was in a dream. The dream car isn't going to be here. When you're awake, it won't be here. It was just a dream. It was just a mental thing. It has zero value for you here, right? When you're awake, your dreams are just like a little memory. They have zero value. You're not going to do anything practical for you. You can learn from dreams, etc. I'm not talking about that. But the things in the dreams have no value for you. You can't wash your hands with water from a dream, right? You see what I'm saying? You can't eat the food that you dreamt about. It's not going to give you calories and protein and carbohydrates. It's not going to, right? It's useless. It has zero value. So that's what the yoga tradition is telling you, that all this matter has zero value for your transcendental nature. It's no value because you're of some other category. We're transcendent. We're not from here. So it's no use for us here. So you can have family, but remembering this concept without getting eluded, without getting carried away, without getting caught up in the illusion of material life. Verse 4, in this world, 2 types of people are free from all anxiety and merged in great happiness. One who is a retarded and childish fool, and one who has approached the Supreme Lord, who is beyond the 3 modes of material nature. So here a bit of a politically incorrect, dramatic statement, but it's saying basically like either you're completely nuts, crazy, you're just totally out of it, and then you can, be free from anxiety and have some happiness, or you are transcendent to this world, and then you can also be free from anxiety and achieve happiness. But basically, if you're caught up, his point of view is that if you're caught up in matter, then you're going to be full of anxiety. You won't have peace. And as Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita, without peace, how can there be love? How can there be happiness? You can't have any happiness. So you'll be stuck in anxiety and frustration. Purport: those who fervently seek material sense gratification are gradually pushed down into a miserable condition of life. Because as soon as one slightly violates the laws of nature, one must suffer sinful reactions. Thus, even materially alert and ambitious persons are constantly in anxiety. And from time to time, they are plunged into great misery. Those who are nonsensical and retarded, however, live in a fool's paradise, and those who have surrendered to Lord Krishna are filled with transcendental bliss. Therefore, both the fool and the devotee may be said to be peaceful in the sense that they are free from the ordinary anxiety of the materially ambitious person. However, this does not mean that the devotee and the retarded fool are on the same platform. A fool's peace is like that of a dead stone, whereas a devotee's satisfaction is based on perfect knowledge. Verse 5. Now we're going to get into the story of this young lady. Once, a marriageable young girl was alone in her house because her parents and relatives had gone that day to another place. At that time, a few men arrived at the house, specifically desiring to marry her. She received them with all hospitality. So this is the story. Again, it's we have to do a little cultural translation to be able to understand the story. So, this isn't a place where people, a young girl is in marriageable age. So it's obviously a culture where, there's that huge pressure for getting young girls married as soon as possible. Totally not our current culture, but this is, ancient India, Southeast Asia. So this young girl, she's alone in her house. So, she's not rich or anything. There's no big family taking care of her. So, she's alone in her house. And these men come, these suitors come. These are suitors, people who might want to marry her. So she has to okay, this is my chance to find a husband, It's a different culture, but try to get into it because the point is something else. So that's the situation. Try to understand the situation where she's alone in the house and these, suitors come. And she, of course, wants to make sure that they have a good impression of her, so she has more options on the table. Verse 6. The girl went to a private place and began to make preparations so that the unexpected male guests could eat. As she was beating the rice, The conch shell bracelets on her arms were colliding and making a loud noise. Now look at this situation. It's a nice little little journey into another culture, another time and place. But again, the spiritual lesson is coming up. But just so you can get into understand the mood here. So as they're here, she's got these guests, right? And she wants to make a good impression. So yeah, I guess it was the custom of the time to prepare a meal for them, right? So then she's responsible for preparing them a meal. So she goes somewhere else to do that. They're in the house and she's somewhere else. The kitchen is separated somewhere else. In the past, they didn't even have kitchen. They just cooked outside. Even I went to India at a time when the little towns would just prepare their meals in front of the house, not inside the house, just in front of the house somewhere. So anyway, so she went somewhere else to prepare the meal, but not so far away because it's a small place. And then she's beating the rice. You're like, what is beating the rice? If you may not have any idea, because why would you beat rice, right? No, it's because rice, it comes in the stalk. So she's getting the real thing, the rice still in the stalk, and then you have to beat it to separate the rice grains from the rice stalk. So maybe you didn't know this. You're learning all these things of ancient human culture. So she had to beat the rice. And you have to keep beating it, right? To separate all the grains of rice so she could get enough grains of rice to cook as part of the meal. Now, she's wearing all these bracelets. So she's wearing conch shell bracelets, right? Because, people like wearing lots of, that was one of the things that women wore, lots of bracelets. But as she's beating all this rice, the bracelets are making all this noise, and she doesn't want to give away that she's having to cook herself. Maybe that's not cool. Maybe she should have had servants. I don't know. I don't know what the mentality was, but somehow it wasn't cool for them to know that it was her beating the rice. Maybe it just wasn't cool. So she didn't want him to hear her beating the rice, and she's beating the bracelets are making this big noise. Verse 7. The young girl feared that the men would consider her family to be poor because their daughter was busily engaged in the menial task of husking rice. Being very intelligent, the shy girl broke the shell bracelets from her arms, leaving just 2 on each wrist. So that's the situation. You don't want to marry a poor girl, Weird, right? We've made some good advancements since then in some things, right? So she breaks all the bracelets and leaves 2, only 2, in each wrist. Verse 8. Thereafter, the young girl continued to husk the rice. The 2 bracelets on each wrist continued to collide and make noise. Therefore, she took 1 bracelet off each arm, and only with 1 left on each wrist, there was no more noise. Now, imagine this situation. It was interesting, cultural vision of some past culture. Right? That's fun. But, okay, imagine the situation, forget the cultural things involved. How are you supposed to take a spiritual lesson from this, right? What spiritual lesson are you supposed to take from this scene? And it's amazing that the Avadhuta Brahmana will take a lesson from this. It's amazing. So what does he learn from this? What are you supposed to learn from having witnessed this scene? And no, it's not that you should buy microwave rice. No, that's not it. So what's the lesson? So verse 9. And this is then now the Avadhuta Brahmana is going to tell the king, O subduer of the enemy, I travel throughout the surface of the earth, learning constantly about the nature of this world. And I thus personally witnessed the lesson of the young girl. So he's just confirming, like, no, look, I just wander around the earth and I witnessed this situation. And the king's like, yeah, what's that got to do with anything? So, let's read the purport. The Brahmana sage here explains to King Yadu, because he's talking, it's Avadhuta Brahmana speaking to King Yadu, that he is not presenting theoretical knowledge. Rather, by wandering throughout the world, the observant and thoughtful Brahmana has personally experienced the lessons learned from all the above-mentioned gurus, all the gurus we've mentioned in the previous classes. Thus, instead of posing himself to be omniscient like God, he humbly explains that he has faithfully learned these lessons in his travels. But what lesson has he learned from this girl? Verse 10. Here we go. Here's the lesson. When many people live together in one place, there will undoubtedly be quarreling. And even if only 2 people live together, there will be frivolous conversation and disagreement. Therefore, to avoid conflict, one should live alone, as we learn from the example of the bracelet of the young girl. Isn't this great? So this is what he picked up. Because when there's a whole bunch of bracelets, there was lots of noise, lots of trouble. But then she got down to just 2 bracelets. But even then, there was noise. So even just 2 people living together, so lots of people living together, forget it, definitely confusion. Even just 2 people living together, there will be frivolous talk and quarreling, disagreement. So what does he recommend? Just live alone. Again, it's one path you can take in life. Again, I love being alone as well. I was alone for a while, but it's not for everyone, right? You can't be alone all the time. And it's actually, it can be dangerous if you're not spiritually awake, and, solitude, being alone, can bring like psychological damage and stuff. So you have to be careful. But, so here's a suggestion though, don't live with other people, be alone. Of course, these days, a lot of people are living alone just because of the way our culture is. It's hard getting together. It's hard, quarreling. It's hard living with other people, and people and because we're so free, nobody's obligated to stay together anymore like the past, like even, maybe your father, your parents or your grandparents, there was a whole social, like, no, you can't divorce, you have to live together, you can't just, go off in your separate ways just because it's a little bad. There was that whole kind of like force, a social force keeping people together. But these days it's like, whatever, it didn't work out, you just walk out, and people like, it's kind of like a bit too much even. It's like, there's no incentive at all to like make relationships work. It's just like, it didn't work, okay, let's go off in our separate ways. And so because of this, a lot of people are being alone, right? A lot of people are alone. And they don't really want to be alone. So that's the problem. The sage wants to be alone. He digs it, so that's okay. But if you're not ready for it, it can be bad. But if you are alone, even if you don't really want to be, at least you can take advantage of it. It is a peaceful situation. And here the sage is saying how good it is. And in Bhagavad-gita, Krishna also says that the yogi will tend to live alone, or at least away from the mass of people. So it's a nice spiritual situation, to have solitude. To have solitude so you can be with yourself and contemplate, the soul and God, and not get caught up with frivolous conversation and disagreements. So there is a definite advantage to living like that, though I understand that it's also hard for some people. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, which is a guru from our lineage from the 17th century, has given a nice example in this regard. Because the young girl mentioned in the story had no husband, she had to fulfill her duties as a host by removing her bracelets so that each wrist held one bracelet only. In the same way, the process of jnana yoga, or spiritual advancement by philosophical speculation, demands that the speculative sages live alone, without any other association. So there's lots of spiritual lineages around the Vedas that would advise sages to be completely renounced and to live alone. So you have that in Hatha Yoga, you had that in, the path of Jnana Yoga, and so lots of paths had this like, no, you just have to go off, go live in a cave, go live in the middle of the forest, near some holy river. But so there was a lot of this going on about just renounced, like the path starts with renouncing. It's not even like once you become enlightened. It's like if you want to become enlightened, first thing out, just forget everybody, walk away and be alone. And gladly, it's not the main path of yoga. It's not what Krishna teaches in Bhagavad-gita. I mean, look at who's learning Bhagavad-gita. It's Arjuna. Arjuna has many wives, not just one wife. He has many wives and many children. And Krishna doesn't tell him to walk, to give up his family life. He's got 4 brothers, they work together, and they all have multiple wives and, multiple children. And, so there's a lot of family going on, and it's fine. And he's Arjuna, he's enlightened, he's perfect. So that is the main path of yoga. That's the path we follow. But there were these other paths, like this Brahman Avadhuta, who were like more into like, no, give everything up and walk off with nothing. Again, like I said, like Jesus also did that. So it's not just the Vedas, but in other spiritual traditions as well. Therefore, to keep a peaceful atmosphere, they must live alone. On the other hand, a king's daughter who has been duly married to an aristocratic prince fulfills her duties to her husband by dressing herself attractively with innumerable ornaments and approaching him for love. Similarly, the goddess of devotion, Bhakti Devi, decorates herself with the innumerable ornaments of the Vaishnavas, who come together to relish the sweet sound of the holy names of the Lord. Because the pure Vaishnavas do not intimately associate with non-devotees, it may be said that they reside alone, and thus they also fulfill the purpose of this verse. There cannot be any quarrel among pure Vaishnavas because they are all on the real platform of desirelessness, not wanting even salvation or mystic powers, what to speak of sense gratification. Because they're all devotees of Krishna, they may freely associate with one another for glorifying the Lord, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 3:25-34. Naikatmatam misprihayanti kechin matpada sevabhirata madiham yeno yenato bhagavata prasajan sabhajayante mama Purushani. A pure devotee who is attached to the activities of devotional service and who always engages in the service of my lotus feet never desires to become one with me. Such a devotee who is unflinchingly engaged always glorifies my pastimes and activities. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is a guru in our lineage from the late 19th, early 20th century, has commented on this verse as follows. The young girl in the story kept only one bracelet on each wrist so that there could be no noisy conflict among the bracelets. Similarly, one should give up the association of those who are not devoted to the Supreme Lord. This is the actual lesson to be learned. A real Vaishnava is always pure and faultless in character. However, in those places where non-devotees congregate, there will undoubtedly be envious criticism of the devotional service of the Lord, and those who falsely attempt to analyze reality without the Supreme Personality of Godhead will create much disturbing noise in the name of philosophy. Therefore, one should remain in those places where the Supreme Lord is properly worshipped according to the Vedic standard. If everyone is dedicated to glorifying the personality of Godhead Krishna, there will not be any impediment in mutual association. However, in a place where people have many different purposes besides the pleasure of the Supreme Lord, social dealings will certainly be disrupted. And of course, this is a real problem. This really happens. And I have students who are married to non-devotees and who are not spiritual people, and they have a hard time, and sometimes the marriages don't work anymore. Because, you know, it's hard being really intimate with somebody who views the world so completely different from you. I mean, there has to be, you know, there has to be some alignment in that issue. So if your goals are one thing and every other person's goals are like opposite to what you're doing, then, you know, it's hard maintaining, you know, a peaceful situation. So that happens sometimes. One should therefore avoid the association of those who are inimical to devotional service. Otherwise, one will be frustrated in achieving the spiritual purpose of life. Because also that happens, you know, it takes a lot of focus to be able to follow your spiritual life. And if you have somebody next to you who's like telling you that that's rubbish, that that's no good, that that's unnecessary, undesirable, then that's going to, you know, slow you down. It's going to drain your will. It's like anything in life, you know, if you want to do something and then you have somebody next to you saying that you shouldn't do it, it's going to, you know, it's going to lose your focus. You know, you want to be an athlete and somebody says, no, you shouldn't bother, you're not good enough. You're not going to have that impetus to be like the, you know, a real athlete. You want to be an artist, you want to excel in anything, no, you can't do it, you're no good. You know, you don't want that, right? You want support. So it's the same thing with spiritual life. We need support. So it can be challenging to, you know, be married with, live with people who don't support your spiritual life. If one lives in a community where the only consideration is the pleasure of the Lord, then one can avoid the contradictory situations caused by many persons competing to satisfy their own material desires. This is the lesson intelligently understood by the Brahmana from the bracelets of the young girl. So much discussion, so many lessons from these bracelets. It's amazing, isn't it? In this connection, Srila Madhvacharya quotes the following. Madhvacharya is an ancient guru in our lineage from I think about 800 years ago. He says, one should not under any circumstances live with those who are not devotees of the Lord. On the other hand, one should stay with many devotees because such association awards liberation. Very well, so we're going to end here, and I hope you've enjoyed these lessons. We had a nice little cultural trip into the past and a nice discussion about association and the effects of being alone in here and out here. I hope you've enjoyed it, and have your rest of your day with lots of peace and lots of love. Hare Krishna.